Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about how to win new customers, how it's hard, and how it's also your job. My name's David. Your eyes do not deceive you. I'm joined here by a colleague that does not share a name. Jacob, introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Even though two David Tisdales would be better than one, my name is Jacob Kamheim, the director of demand gen here, kind of leading out our new customer acquisition programs that we run here at the VX Group and helping our clients strategize the way in which they bring their product to market. So excited to be here today, and I'll just go under the guise as David today and turn it back over to the David number one.
All right. Like I said, thanks for joining us today. We know everyone's busy on Thursday afternoons trying to clear the plate for summer Friday afternoons. So hopefully your week has gone well, and looking forward to digging into this with you today. So as I mentioned, winning new customers is obviously, difficult. It's something that takes discipline. And as a business leader, if you are an owner or a leader of a company, it is ultimately your responsibility to find new customers. It is providing opportunity for your sales team and giving them the proper direction and opportunity to find you new customers. Obviously, is a part of that formula, but their success or failure is ultimately on you. Sometimes when we're in the business, it's especially if there's a significant monetary compensation to a sales team, we often get caught up in, why it's not working. Why, if I'm spending so much money, they are still not delivering on what I would expect. But looking at yourself and what you can do to provide them the opportunities is a big piece of their success. Jacob, anything on that?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, and you as a leader have to do everything you can to arm your sales force to not only hit their numbers, but make sure that they have the foresight and the pipeline that they need to sustain that long-term growth, not only personally, but to get the company to where they need to be. So totally agree.
Right. So if we can acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that there's always things that we can do better to make sure our team is performing to the expectations we would expect, recognizing that the headwinds for finding and acquiring new customers are very strong. There are a lot in the modern sales environment. There's a lot going against your team, and this is not a woe is them type situation. It's just calling it what it is. I mean, it is again, it takes discipline. It takes a nuanced approach because things are changing so fast, and their job is a moving target. Especially as it relates to finding and acquiring new customers, not managing just the portfolio business you currently have. So on the topic of, being introspective here on Thursday afternoon, we talk about being in the business a lot, and, especially if you are an owner or a second generation family owned manufacturer who is a common type of company we work with. You've been in the business for your whole life. You see the business as a huge player in some regards. Whether you're a 50, 100, couple $100 million company, in your segment, you see your company as this big player. And on the right here is how prospects see your business. They don't know you. Even if you're again, 100, 150, $200 million company, you are a small player, especially as it relates to kind of competitions for a supplier budget. And no one knows you exist. You need to operate under this assumption. And it's hard to do that when you've been in the business so long. Go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, no, disagreeing with you. It's one of those things that just being in the day-to-day of you see the guy looking up at these amazing machines that he's building, and that's the life that they're living. But outside of that, it's truly a black box. And just want to echo everything David was mentioning, because it can be quite shocking, truly. When we run these programs, it's just sometimes when, you kind of live in that silo, there are times where, you think kind of everyone should know what this is or should know what you do. But in reality, it's up to us to be the person, be the ones that go in and, make sure that we're educating the marketplace. And that's, like David mentioned, one of the hardest things to do. So totally agree.
So why don't prospects know you exist? So these are 6 symptoms that we see pretty regularly, especially with American mid-market businesses. Number 1 being just a weak, dated, or undifferentiated brand. The word brand can conjure up any kind of, it can be a buzzword. It can conjure up the similar words like marketing. But your brand is wildly important in today's marketplace. And if you have not looked at your brand from a lens of, a $1 million customer coming in your front door, would they be impressed? Do you look like the type of company they would want to do business with? Mm-hmm. You look at your brand, and we don't just mean your logo. You just look at the entire package. If you haven't updated it in the past 3 years, and you put it beside some of your competitors, and it looks like you haven't updated it in 3 years, it's time to really do something there. I mean, letting a brand age to the point where it's feeling dated is a bit too long. And again, I know brand can be a buzzword to some, but it's a worthwhile investment. The stronger brand you have, and the more exposure you're going to get in the marketplace, and more importantly, in terms of prospecting or any kind of business development, I guarantee you 100% of anybody that you're trying to do business with is going to your website before they talk to anybody on your team. Yep. So if your brand is undifferentiated and dated, it's not going to serve the business. Jacob, you want to take the second one?
Yeah. So no consistent marketing, advertising, or promotion. So these actually, when I look at these next couple bullet points, I think all of these really roll up to this undifferentiated branding. Like if you have an undifferentiated brand, even if you have consistent marketing, advertising, or promotion, it's not really going to have the same impact as if you have a unique, impactful, branding sort of approach to your business that's going to allow you to stand out, right? So, when we think about not having consistent marketing, advertising, or promotion, really what we see often is, some of our companies that we've seen, they'll go into this and, they'll put a credit card on Google and they'll say, just run some ads and hopefully something will come through. Or, hey, I'm going to make this big push for this one event, but I'm only going to do it one time. Right. And I'm satisfied because I checked the box off. There's this notion that doing some of these things can, bring us new business, when in reality, one of the ingredients that we really need to make sure we're hitting on is a consistency, right? You could, it's again, rolling up into brand, but if you're not doing things consistently, you do things to check off a box, and you say that you're satisfied with doing this once or twice, it's just not going to get you where you need to be. Yeah. The biggest thing that we say is, if you're not prospecting your leads, somebody else is. And that's really, when we think about consistency, that's the ones who are persistent are the ones who are going to win the business. I have one stat, David, then I'll turn it back over to you. 80% of communications, the first touch point happens between that 5th and 12th attempt. Right. So when we think about giving up too early, we see it all the time. If we don't go hard enough in our communication to the prospect, that's not going to give us the best chance to succeed. So just remember that 5th to 12th attempt is that sweet spot where we start hitting our prospects.
Right. Third bullet's pretty straightforward. I mean, trade shows and events are obviously just now coming back here in 2021, but the way you approach and the way your team approaches these trade shows or events is very important. And events can be everything from, small happy hours in your city, and then trade shows, call it what it is. If it's if a trade show trip is an opportunity for your sales team to get together and, have a good time, that's one thing. But if you're actually using trade shows to generate new opportunities, there are things that you should be doing before, during, and after that trade show to really optimize your investment there. because they cost a chunk of change, not only to exhibit there, but to make sure you're getting a return on investment. Even walking the shows, you follow some simple steps, and even if you're not exhibiting, you can really make sure people know you're there. They know you exist there. So the fourth one, probably being the most important of this list in terms of what we see, no hunting process or people. Just because you have people in seats under titles like business development does not mean they have a consistent process for hunting and prospecting. That is a huge gap we see very consistently on the modern sales approach to every week going out, targeting ideal customers, and teeing up new conversations for your business. Jacob, this is your world.
No, totally. Yeah, I appreciate that, David. And with this hunting process, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we'll be, hearing about when we are, talking to potential new clients. It's like, what we ask, in your sales meetings, what sort of things are you running through? And, essentially it's the same answer. They'll pull up, a list of all of their opportunities, and then we'll have all the sales reps in the room. And, the sales leader will essentially ask the team, all right, guys, well, what's going on here? And the answers that they get are, well, you know what? I think I should call this guy. I think it's been about long enough, right? Or, hey, you know what? Actually, I should probably email this person. I guess it's been a couple weeks. I think that would be a good idea, right? There has to be a system in place with your steps defined. Each step have a particular end goal in mind. We don't want to be reaching out just to say that I reached out and my sales manager is happy with me because it shows that I have an activity in my CRM. That's not what we want to be doing, right? So even going further, if you do have a process in place, but each step of that process doesn't have a clear outcome or a clear end goal that delivers some sort of value to the prospect, that's not going to help move the needle on any of your conversations. So, again, a big trap is not only that there's no process, but something that we see across the board is, there's all this time spent in, how many days should I spend between this touch and that touch? And they have everything built out, but they're not quite, the sales reps at the end of the day are not quite sure why they're reaching out or what they should be saying. So that's equally as important when you think about having that process in place. That goes more into the people side of things, arming them with what they need to successfully reach out and deliver value at every touch point along the way.
Yep. The last two bullets there, largely invisible online, making sure potential customers can find you, not only for your, capabilities list or some random specification, but the problems that they need solving. Google is built around problem solving, not just keyword stuffing. So looking at your business and what problems do you solve for your customers? What solutions are they looking for? And making sure you're findable online is a huge important to making sure prospects know you exist and can find you. And the last bullet, just nobody cares about trade media. In PR plays a much smaller role than it did 5-10 years ago. When's the last time you opened a trade publication and found someone you wanted to do business with? I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's just not a good place to invest in terms of a brand awareness or finding new customers.
Right. And while it holds a special place in all of our hearts, that trade media, it's just not as, like David said, it's just not as prevalent as it used to be. So.
Right. So we acknowledge that, if you're admittedly not in the background of sales or marketing, this is probably how you see the field. This is probably how you see a large portion of your team's responsibilities. They're reaching out, they're making phone calls, they're building connections over the phone, and everything's based around, this piece of technology right here. This is how your prospects see sales, especially if you are overly leveraged in any kind of cold calling approach. The technology is advancing to a point where any unwelcome call might show up on your prospect's phone just like this. If you're doing volume calls, apps are tagging you as a scam risk or a spam risk. So just calling out that it's not about one channel, in this case, channel being phone calls. It's about multiple channels, and understanding that technology is advancing, on any kind of outreach. Right now, cold email plays a huge role, and one day that's not going to be effective. But making sure that you recognize that the approaches that worked a decade ago are there's various, again, the headwinds are against your team in terms of kind of continuing those older traditional tactics.
Yep, that's exactly right. And David, if I might just want to add something, quickly here. This is one of those situations where we'll hear sales managers often speak about, in sales meetings. Okay, all right, guys. Well, how many dials are we making? How many dials are we making? And going back to this whole notion of your online presence being important, like really, it's up to you as the salesperson or marketer or leader to go in and not only give your salespeople the tools they need to deliver value, but to give your audience the tools that they need to educate themselves. And what do we mean by that, right? So that's having that online presence. That's having those pieces of collateral, ebooks, white papers, those blogs, like maybe examples of cool projects you've either been, you've contracted or you've finished recently, like in your proud and you want a display that shows your best work, right? Like, so it's really having, that sort of, like David mentioned, that multi-channel presence and not putting all of your eggs in this basket. Because, I don't know about you, if I get a call from a zip code, or excuse me, an area code that doesn't look familiar, I'm hanging it up. Right. So, and listen, I live in this world. We live in this world, and we still do that. So just as important is to make sure that you're giving your audience or your addressable market the things they need to educate themselves in a virtual setting too.
I like the ones that match yours or match your area code. Those are great. Especially when you grew up in Charlotte. I still have a 704 number, and now I live in Charleston. So the majority of 704 numbers that call me are robocalls at this point.
Yeah.
So prospects don't want to talk to you. They don't. Let's just roll through this and have a brief conversation about it. They don't answer the phone, and they definitely don't respond to the first email. They avoid any kind of level of meaningful conversation, especially on that introductory call or conversation, or whenever you're meeting them for the first time. Corporate policy may be anti-relationship, meaning gift policies. There used to be a very strong direct mail campaigns where you could, send something to someone, and sometimes those just come right back because they're not even allowed to accept anything over, 50 bucks or so. Everyone's hiding behind email, text, web forms, and chat right now. There's activity there kind of below the surface, but everybody's using it as kind of a smoke screen. We see current customers of our clients using web forms to submit communications. They're existing customers. So rather than picking up the phone and calling their account rep, they're using the web form to submit an inquiry or a question. That's very interesting because they already have a relationship with your business, yet they're still going to your website.
Yeah.
Ghosting is now an accepted business behavior. This is a concept that we are constantly talking about at the VX Group because it's our job to really get past some of these challenges, ghosting being one of them. Ghosting we've seen happen at any part of the sales cycle or relationship building process. It's happened after you've sent a quote. Once they get any level of sticker shock, it's more comfortable just to disappear than to talk through that.
Right.
And it's an accepted business practice at this point, which it's not our fault. You can get upset about it, but acknowledging that it's out there and it's a concept is an important piece. And then the procurement software industry, software-led versus people-led. If you're in manufacturing, this whole procurement software reverse auction segment. If you're looking for a product, you show up as a supplier, and the software is facilitating that kind of bidding, quoting, rather than a personal interaction. And that is very challenging to, again, add value beyond just kind of what your products and capability stack looks like. Jacob,
Yep.
anything on this list?
Yeah, back to not with kind of risking sounding like a broken record. This back to this whole notion of prospects wanting to educate themselves, and they want to feel empowered to be the one to reach out and feel like they made the decision to reach out to talk to you. This is arming prospects with information is so important, because in today's world, rather than cold calls being the primary form of procuring new leads, it's having the presence online. It's having the necessary resources for prospects to, in their mind, feel like they're making an educated, informed decision to reach out to you. Of course, outbound is extremely important, but like a piece of outbound is really driving them to your online or virtual collateral, right?
Yeah.
So, using that as sort of a vehicle to then allow them to educate themselves and then be like, you know what, this looks like a great partner I would want to do business with, because I vetted them on my own time. I vetted them in the way that I wanted to. I wasn't, called out of the blue. I wasn't, texted in the middle of something, right? That's why it's so important. Again, just kind of going back to that whole notion. So, David, I'll turn it back over to you. Just, one thing to keep in mind.
Right. So this all distills down into kind of no awareness, no interaction equates to no relationship and ultimately no sales. If prospects don't know you exist and you can't get through to them to interact, in any type of human to human level, you're not going to be able to form a relationship, and you're not going to be able to generate a business relationship with them. So what Jacob was just touching on in regards to prospects doing their own research, they want you to be there when they need you, and they don't want you any time before that. That's why timing of some of these things is so crucial. If you happen to hit them right on the right day, that's amazing. We've seen it happen. However, you have to be very lucky, and you actually have to be persistent with that as well. Because yes, they might ghost you the first 4 times, but the 5th time hits them right at the right time. They would be more inclined to have a conversation with you at that time. So 8 things to do right now if any of this resonates with you. Number 1, know and focus on your ideal customers. Your sales team is going to chase anything that moves. You need to make sure that they're aligned to who is the ideal fit for your business, the types of companies and the types of people that work best with your business is the guiding principle for everything, not just outbound sales, everything. Who ideally do we want to be doing business with? What size are they? What's the ideal, contract size with them? You can do this by 80/20ing your current customer list. We can help you with something like that, to understand what are the commonalities between your current ideal customers, and how do you use that to go find more of them. Number 2 would be to differentiate your products and deliver real value. We get, again, when you're in the business, it's very hard to look at your products in a way that is truly unique and different, especially if you're in a highly commoditized space. We understand it's challenging, but the key to modern sales is building a value stack before the purchase decision. That way, somebody isn't going to buy from you. It's because you didn't build enough value. It's not because they just didn't want to buy from you. So making sure you're positioning your products and your brand, your website in a unique way that shows why they would want to go with you versus a competitor. Jacob, anything on those two?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yep. So know, track, and manage your numbers. Revenue obviously is a huge, important number, but it's a lagging indicator. You need to make sure you have leading indicators that you can use to run your business. What are the levers you can pull to make sure you're on the right track to meet your ultimately your revenue goals? But what are the things that you can adjust and you want to be looking at very frequently to make sure the business is headed in the right direction. 4 would be make a great first impression, and second and third. As I mentioned earlier, 100% of the people you want to do business with are going to your website. So go to your website right now. If you scroll to the bottom, does it say copyright anything other than 2021 at the bottom? Because if it does, you're not making a good first impression. Second and third impressions can be any form, obviously, based on the path of the relationship. Making sure that your team is aligned. If you do have marketing and sales teams, they need to be not siloed, and make sure that the message is consistent. And the first, second, third, and on down the line are great impressions to build a relationship from. Number 5 is something we feel very, very strongly about. A lot of the companies we work with have hybrid roles. Again, we've talked about the title. Just because you have a business development title doesn't mean you're doing prospecting and outbound the proper way. But if you have a hybrid role would include things like VP of sales and marketing. That would be a hybrid role. But specifically to business development account management, the talents and discipline that it takes to go out and find and acquire new customers are considerably different than managing accounts. And you can distill it down into the hunters can't be farmers thing, but it's a little more nuanced than that. And fishing isn't in that analogy either, right? So making sure that you have team members dedicated to fishing daily is a piece of this. And sure, growing accounts is a huge part of growth, but making sure that those people are not expected to go out and find new customers is a pitfall we see time and time again. Keep these roles separately. Keep these teams separate. Jacob, anything on that?
No, yeah, that's exactly right. 2 very, very different types of personalities, and it's really almost mutually exclusive. I wouldn't go that far, but it's right about there. So
why don't you take number 6, Jacob?
Yeah, so plan and deploy inbound and outbound demand generation. Again, going back to when we think about inbound, what does that mean? What is the difference between that and outbound? We can get into that, but as a concept, in theory, these should all just blend into your overarching new customer acquisition strategy. So in a perfect world, the lines between inbound and outbound blur because you're doing such a great job of creating awareness and reaching out, while having this amazing repository of information and paid ads and blogs, all of these things that are going to drive your inbound traffic. You're going to have such a great blend. The ideal situation is to have marketing leaders fighting over was this inbound or outbound, right? Because you're doing such a great job of both. But when you're planning and deploying them, just things to remember, especially for inbound, making sure, like David mentioned, things like keyword stuffing. Let's say you work in the aerospace industry, and I'm going to say, hey, like maybe I can game the Google system by creating a blog where I say aerospace 45 times, so when someone blogs, searches for aerospace, my blog comes up. That's not going to work. You have to identify that ideal customer set and then think about the traits that stand out most about them and what they care about the most, and then create your inbound campaigns around that, right? Same for your outbound demand gen. When you think about outbound demand gen, that's more traditionally centered around like a person reaching out, somebody that they can put a name to from your organization. So still taking those same concepts of what do your ideal customers care about, but then phrasing that in a way not only that it's coming from like a real representative of your company, but then being able to drive them back to those online or virtual resources that you've created. Make sure that they're able to have a very clear distilled value proposition in that outbound email that you send. Drive them to your site, allow them to educate themselves, feel empowered to say, hey, I want to reach out and have a conversation. So either they respond back to that email or they submit a form. Again, that's where the whole blurring the lines between inbound and outbound happens. So again, when you do this the right way, the messaging is going to be consistent across channels. It's going to drive home the same types of value. It's not going to be disjointed. You're just going to have 2 different ways of delivering that same message with that overall end goal of both of them to generate that first meeting. So Number 7, David. That's all you.
Yeah. So 7 and 8. Number 7, making sure that you're trying out things like e-commerce, web chat, what we call self-service. If you have a high percentage of lower ticket sales and your team is inundated with those, there's some simple things from an e-commerce standpoint that could streamline that. And essentially, you can deploy the robots to transact with customers if it is things like reorders or, again, small transactional things. So your team can focus on the big ticket items and also the high value relationships. And number 8, above all, just be easy to do business with. Again, being there when the customer needs you is the overarching concept here.
Yep.
But not making the customer jump through hurdles.
Yep.
Having to for them to come up with the questions they need to ask and making it difficult for them to get those answers. It can take various forms, but making sure that you and your team are aligned with how can we make it easiest on our customers to give us money.
And David, can I just add one quick thing to that? So, with being easy to do business with, the first thing that probably comes to mind is like, oh, I need to be a likable person, right? I need to be someone who people enjoy talking to. That's true, but more importantly, that's where the process and having that outlined sort of every single step of the customer journey from pre to post acquisition is lined out. For instance, is it easy to do business with somebody who, if I'm a customer and I submit a form, I have to submit it 3 times to get somebody to respond back to me? Even though they could say the nicest thing back to me and I love them, it still took me 3 times to reach out, right?
Yeah.
If I'm looking for something on their website and their website is outdated and it's unintuitive and it's clunky, I love my rep, but I can't find what I'm trying to look for on their website, right? So it's difficult. So those are the sort of things that you really need to remember. It's not just about being personable. That's a huge part, but there's more to it, like David said.
That's a great distinction. It's not always on the rep's shoulders. It's an organizational initiative to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for people to transact with us. So with that, thanks again for joining us on Thursday afternoon. I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll drop you an email. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And thanks a lot, Jacob.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right, bye.